Welcome to the Living While Loving Your Child Through Addiction podcast. Here, we focus on self care as we tend to our own lives while also extending love and compassion to our kids. This podcast offers science backed skills and ways to bring hope and healing to your entire family. My guest today, Colleen Freeland, is a master certified life coach, founder of Emotional Sobriety Coaching, and host of the top rated podcast, It's Not About the Alcohol. She works with high achieving professional women to help them cut back on drinking by as much as 80% through the lens of emotional sobriety, not shame or surrender. Her approach comes from both personal experience and deep training. She holds a master's in health coaching, a bachelor's in biology and chemistry education, and certifications in addiction and recovery, as well as women's functional and integrative health. For more than 20 years, Colleen quietly battled heavy daily drinking while keeping up the appearance of a high performing life. Her turning point came when she realized the real problem wasn't alcohol, it was what she believed about herself. That insight became the foundation of her philosophy, get happy, not sober. Since then, she's helped thousands of women build a relationship with alcohol and with themselves that's rooted in awareness and self trust rather than avoidance. So, thank you for being here today, Colleen.
It's good to see you again, Heather.
So, Colleen and I have been friends since we worked together like 6 years ago. And when I first met Colleen, she was alcohol free. And that was her journey for a couple of years until she very intentionally decided to have a drink. And she shared that publicly that she didn't think she needed to be abstinent anymore because she trusted herself to just have one or whatever she decided to do that day. And when I saw that, all of the messaging from the hundreds of AA meetings that I had sat in came flooding to me. Like I was filled with all this fear because I didn't want to lose my friend. And I had heard that once a person has a problem with drinking, they have two choices. They can either quit and be completely abstinent or die. Like that's what you hear over and over again in AA meetings. And there was also this other part of me that was like, okay, you have a different understanding of things now. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it's not all black and white, not all one size fits all. So I trusted in our relationship enough to text you and just say, I want to talk about this. I want to hear what you're thinking and feeling. And so I think that's a great place to start this interview is for you to share where you were at that time and what you were thinking about that maybe things didn't have to be that way, that you didn't have to be alcohol free forever.
Well, there's a lot of things that led up to that decision. And of course, I had a lot to work through as well. I could have all the confidence in the world in myself. I could see the neuroscience, the studies that show within 6 to 12 months of breaking an addiction, the prefrontal cortex is denser. Your gray matter, the connections for self-regulation are denser. Becoming addicted to something is a learning process. Becoming unaddicted to something is also a learning process. And so I could see that it was possible. This neuroplasticity was not a concept that was around when, in the 1930s, when AA was born, somebody decided it was a disease. And now, almost 100 years later, that's how it's seen. It's seen as a disease. And I'll tell you, from somebody who suffered from it, it sure as hell felt like a disease. But I think that I saw that it was possible scientifically. And if you zoom out and look at, population statistics, over 50% of people who get in the weeds with alcohol experience some form or some amount of addiction, which is a spectrum. Over 50% of those people go back to normal drinking without being fully abstinent and without relapsing into addiction. So I think what has happened is in our society, there's just this very segmented, compartmentalized culture around addiction and recovery. But if you, like, Heather, if I had never self-identified to you as somebody who had a drinking problem and my story had been different, I was drinking too much, I decided to take a break, it's kind of like losing weight or doing any other self-improvement. I had adopted that narrative. I had told you what to think about me and our shared experience in that culture where addiction is a disease, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, and that as an alcoholic, even if I'm sober, I'm not qualified mentally to make good decisions for myself.
Yeah, I thought about that when I was thinking about this interview, and that had you not said that to me, because I never knew you when you were drinking before, and had you not said that to me, I wouldn't have had that thought that goes along with that. But we're just so conditioned still, even though like I know all these things. Now I see like I can't even watch TV or a movie without seeing all of the ways that we're being conditioned by them all day, every day.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a very specific portal into that culture. And if you identify as somebody who has had a drinking problem in the past and the solution is no alcohol, it creates a self-fulfilling identity. The studies show that it is not genetics that predicts addiction. Of course, it correlates. Some people have different enzymes and process alcohol in different ways that make it easier to drink more or higher tolerance, these sorts of things. It's not like that doesn't correlate, but that doesn't cause addiction. What causes addiction is the belief that there's a difference between people who can drink normal and people who can't. And for whatever reason, I'm one of those people who can't. That is the belief that is the foundation of addiction. Because there's also studies with hardcore, street drugs, meth or heroin, where we think that, oh, you lose control. Loss of control is a myth. People who have hardcore addictions can abstain from use when they're motivated. And by that I mean somebody's paying them and they're able to stop. So this idea that we can't control ourselves or that we can't stop our use is something that is self-fulfilling prophecy. And the truth is, when I look back at my own life, I could control my drinking. I didn't drive drunk. I didn't drink all day at work. It was really only that certain times I was motivated to control myself and certain times I wasn't. And what was the difference? And that was me, that was me.
Hmm. Yeah, that reminds me what you said of Johann Hari's TED Talk, where he talks about the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And he talks about people coming home from war who were using, I believe, heroin.
Yes.
Yeah. And they were able to quit. And the way we approach things in our society is to label and blame and isolate, which makes everything harder.
Yeah. It makes it so much harder. And what I want to say about that quote is the opposite of addiction is connection. I know for myself, that didn't make a lot of sense to me because I had friends, I had a husband, I had kids. What the connection is it's a lack of connection with ourself. I was a high functioning go, 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 go woman. And that's the type of client that I deal with now. I hadn't stopped to pee or to process. And when you do that for years and years, where you are just too busy to notice yourself, to talk kindly to yourself, we have this negative inner self talk, that perfectionistic, goal oriented, never good enough mindset. We don't realize that the way we think is creating all this pressure and stress. And it makes a lot of sense as to why we drink or do anything because we need some form of relief or escape. So, what I found is that the solution was that connection with myself, how I talk to myself, how I pay attention to myself. And, now I'm busier than ever, more successful than ever, and yet I know I have to take time throughout each day to check in with Colleen, who is a real person. I'm a body living in real time. And that's the path out, because if you felt connected, if you felt when I feel grounded and confident and calm and good, I'm on time, I'm not late. You drink like somebody who feels that way. Like, the solution to addiction is a feeling that you're okay.
Yeah, that feeling comfortable in your own skin,
Yeah.
which is been a big part of my journey is, as Helena's struggle with substance use put a spotlight on something that was missing in my life. That's been my same journey as well, is to create that connection with myself, to establish that relationship, to know myself. I didn't even really know myself before. And like you said, I never stopped to think about what I needed. I was always taking care of everybody else and thinking about what they needed. And so it's really the solution to so much more than addiction. It's really the solution to really the way we live life these days, just so distracted and achievement oriented rather than internally, thinking about ourselves and what we need and working on that relationship. And one thing that you mentioned to me too is that it took you longer to get help initially because of that abstinence only model. Can you tell me how that was like more of a roadblock?
Well, of course, because in our society, if you raise your hand and say, I'm drinking too much, and you ask for help, then there's one solution. You need to put down the drink, get your butt to AA, get yourself a sponsor, commit to permanent lifetime sobriety. You have to admit that you're broken and powerless. And so there were times, I've had experiences where I realize I'm drinking too much coffee. I'm not shamed about that. I'm gonna walk that back. Maybe I'll take a break. Maybe I'll, titrate and tone it down. Like, there's no right or wrong way to bring yourself back into balance. But what happens with alcohol use disorder is because of the stigma that if you are not a normal drinker, then you can never drink again, then we hide that, and I never thought that I had a drinking problem. For years, going through college and early adulthood, I drank like everybody else. Even when I was puking my guts out in college, I didn't see that as a problem because that's the social circle I was in. But once I realized I was the only one of my friends polishing off a bottle of wine on a Tuesday night, then I became like ashamed of that. And that is actually the seed to the mental health issue. It is a thinking problem, not a drinking problem. Like, I perceived that I drank more than I should, and either it's because I liked to, or because I needed to, or because I couldn't control it. And of course, you're not going to talk about any of that. And so that is what breeds the disconnect from yourself, because there's things that you're not allowing yourself to know about yourself. And so you have to just run faster than all that internal awareness. I felt ashamed of it, and I never processed that. And I couldn't ask for help because I would have had to admit that I was an alcoholic. I had no idea that, it's just as normal to get in the weeds with alcohol as it is any other substance that could be addictive. It's not who you are, it's the damn substance. It's an addictive substance. But
Yeah.
so's everything. So's our phones. Everything can get out of balance. But there's just so much shame that, probably 10, 15 years, had I been aware of like the program I have now, where it's like, no, 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 you don't have to quit drinking. Let's start working on the reasons why you're drinking. Let's start looking at, the environment of your life that's making you feel like you're living in a pressure cooker. Let's work on your mental health. That would have been so much more inviting. But instead, I just drank in secret and hid it, because I also thought that I had to hit a rock bottom. I remember in the last few years of my drinking, there was an internal narrative where I was like, well, worst case scenario, I can mention to everybody what's obviously true. I'm an alcoholic and get myself a 2-week pass and go to a rehab or something. Worst case scenario, I can always just pull the rehab card, but I'm just going to keep going until I can't go anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like what you said about it's a thinking problem, not a drinking problem. And this idea that you came up with, where I'm not sure if you're still doing it or not, but I loved when you told me that you were having calls where everybody has a drink
Yeah.
and then is really intentional about what they're thinking and feeling. And I'm like, that right there is magic.
Yeah, we call them mindful drinking meetups. I had created all this content, and one of them was a mindful drinking experiment where you have one drink by yourself and, set with it. Because most people, I would have told you years ago, like, I don't even feel one drink. Like a bottle of wine's my damn warm up lap. But these are stories in our head, right? We're just disconnected. You don't have a high tolerance for alcohol. You have a high tolerance for ignoring yourself, my friend. So I had been telling my clients, do this mindful drinking experiment. And then some of them, what I love about my program is all the things I've learned. It's because some brave woman raises her hand, is like, I keep trying to do that, but I don't stop after one. And so I said, let's me and you meet on Friday night and I'll have one drink with you and then we'll sit with it and I'll do it with you. And then that's how the meetups were born because, of course, other women were like, can I come? Because I can't have one and stop either. And so that's part of the reprogramming is learning to experience alcohol from an honest perspective. This is what I feel. This is what feels good. There's 100% chance my body never enjoyed drinking a bottle of wine. I was just disconnected from the felt experience. So that's one of the things we do is teach people how to use alcohol again in a pleasurable way and be honest with themselves.
Yeah. What do you think is most surprising that comes out of those calls?
That they can feel it after one. And I've got such a high awareness of my body. I can feel it after one sip and I can still feel that 30 minutes later. So I think they're shocked that they can feel it. That's they literally think it takes at least 2 drinks to even kind of get a buzz. 3 probably be better. Having one and stopping and then realizing an hour later that the buzz is still on board is really eye-opening. It's a learning.
Yeah, I used to say that back in the days when I used to drink all the time, I used to say that the thing in my brain that tells me I'm drunk is broken. And
Mhm.
so I just blow right past it. But it was exactly what you're talking about. It was a lack of just completely disconnected from myself and not paying attention and not understanding any signal in my body because I didn't like to feel them.
Right. And what the reframe that I say, people are like you or I don't have an off switch. No, gal, alcohol is your off switch. It's the only thing that ever allows you to shut down your brain. It's the transition between home and work because otherwise, like that's the biggest mistake people make is I want to quit drinking so I can be more productive. Oh, no. Like that is actually exactly the problem. You're using alcohol because it gives you a break. And so what's really true is not that you don't know when you've had enough. You're just in the habit of ignoring that because it's a felt sensation and you're not paying attention to how it feels in your body. And so, yeah, your off switch is never broken. You're just not you've trained yourself to ignore all of it.
Yeah. And I'd also trained myself to ignore what in life was completely unacceptable to me.
Right. Right.
You
Keep going.
can't ignore one without the other.
Right. Yeah. Which, there's so many fun isms and some of them are true and not, how you do one thing is how you do everything, but it's not how you drink that needs to change. It's how you wake up in the morning and move throughout your day. Because if you land in the evening and have a regulated nervous system and feel good about all you've accomplished and feel like you deserve a break, you are enough. Again, you drink like somebody who feels that way.
What does it feel like? Or, what do you hear from these women, like, when they realize, "Oh my gosh, this is something that I can change and the lights start to come on and the self-awareness and all of that.
What do I hear from them?
Yeah, like I imagine it's pretty powerful experience as, maybe in the beginning when they start working with you, they're like, I don't know what else to do. I don't want to go absent. I want to try this. And then they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much bigger than I realized.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite comments is, "Oh my God, it's not about the alcohol." Like that's the name of my podcast, right? And that's what I'm always talking about. And then somebody will be like, "You've said that 1,000 times. I've heard it 1,000 times. Oh my God, it's not about the alcohol." One of the things that we work on is the shame and guilt. This is why I call myself the hangover whisperer, because what has to change first is that you have to be okay where you're at. You're a human being working on a habit that you would like to see change. And habits don't go away overnight. They live in your body. It's not just the last domino that falls, the last drink. It's the thoughts about how you don't have enough time or you aren't good enough. Like there's a big onion that has to be peeled. And so what what I think is shocking at first that requires such a trust fall is you can work on your behavior and trying to cut back. I'm not against that at all. But what you really have to do is look forward to your next hangover because that's the work we're going to be doing. You can't avoid the shame that you need to process by avoiding it with good behavior, using good behavior to avoid bad feelings. And so that's why I'm like, yes, you get to keep your drink, my friend. And we're going to be working on your shame about that. And if they just quit drinking, we can't ever get into the heart of that, those stuck negative emotions and negative beliefs. So, ironically, the first step to being okay is learning how to drink the way you drink and not get into that shame spiral because that's what resets the cycle is the anxiety and the shame, that causes so much dysregulation. I mean, of course, alcohol jacks up your cortisol and there's physiological things, but honestly, the emotional component is so much bigger. The I shouldn't be doing this, something is wrong with me. And then it's that all or nothing. I'm not going to drink and then screw it. I had one. I guess I might as well have all the rest of them. And it is learning how to be okay with yourself when you make a mistake that is what allows us to move forward. The brain learns through evidence of progress and improvement, not failure. And so when you wake up, I did it again, something is wrong with me. Why do I keep doing this? You can't learn when you're in that shame spiral. That's why we keep making the same stupid mistake over and over because we're not learning from it. So, the way to learn how to change your drinking behavior is to first learn how to clear the shame and guilt around it. And then the light bulbs start coming on like, oh, it did occur to me to stop drinking after 2 drinks. I just wasn't listening. How could I support that thought to be stronger and more clear next time? We learn from our mistakes. So you got to sit and you got to look backwards. But until you can be okay with yourself, it's going to be very hard to learn.
Yeah, which is exactly the same thing with like, when I talk to parents about looking back on a conversation they had with their child that didn't go well. Like there's so much value there, so much to learn, but it has to be safe for you. You have to have self-compassion to go back and look at that to learn from it. Um, and what I love about everything you just shared is it completely goes against the idea that a person has to be completely abstinent in order to start healing. When you're gonna say, well, I'm going to take away this thing that's been helping you get through life, and then I want you to figure out how to do it. Whereas what you're explaining is with it, it's part of the learning process and that a person can heal while they're still actively drinking.
They absolutely can. If your brain will help you get whatever you think you want. And that's another thing that I teach. Wanting the absence of alcohol, that's not really a thing. Like what you want is for the absence of alcohol to be a side effect of you feeling more relaxed, connected, working on your mental health. And so, like the whole thing with sobriety or alcohol reduction programs that are behavior based is that they're actually making the obsession worse. Like when you wake up and you're like, I'm not going to drink tonight. That's like, I'm not going to eat pizza tonight. Now you're smelling pizza, you're noticing pizza, like your reticular activating system is all focused on the pizza or on the alcohol. One of my favorite shares in my program is when women say, "Oh my gosh, I woke up this morning and realized it never occurred to me to drink last night." Like that's really what you want. And so the more you focus on trying to change your behavior, literally, the harder it gets. You want to change the conditions that cause you to want different things, that cause relaxation in other ways, so that less alcohol is a side effect of you being more whatever it is you want to be.
So that sounds like what emotional sobriety is. You want to explain that a little bit and how that's part of your program?
Emotional sobriety is when you're no longer intoxicated by bullshit, your own or anybody else's. It is radical ownership that the cause of your feelings are your thoughts and your mindset. So the words that somebody uttered that sounds came out of their face and entered your eardrums, somebody said something that's not what's upsetting you. It's what you're making it mean. It's how you're seeing yourself in that situation. So I have like 6 skills of emotional sobriety that I teach. One of them is nervous system literacy, how to read your own body language, because you think how you feel. If you feel super relaxed, you think relaxed. If you feel super generous, you think generous thoughts. If you're pissed off and think nobody likes you, then all of your thoughts are scanning for more evidence that that's true. And so learning how to read your own body language, your mind changes every time your mood changes. Like, has nobody noticed this? What's true, yes, yesterday's truth, tomorrow's bullshit. I'm never going to drink, I'm always going to drink. Like, these are just words in your head. And so one of the most important things is how to read your body language. Your body speaks energy, not English. And so learning how to realize, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, then you don't use your brain in the anxious gear. It's kind of like understanding what gear you're in the car. Are you in forward or reverse before you step on the gas? And you don't want to use your brain to solve problems when you feel anxious because it's going to create more anxiety. You want to learn how to get back into a state of safety, security, calm, that neutral okayness. You don't have to feel rainbows and butterflies shooting out your ass. You want to just feel like it's safe in the present moment. And so that is a skill, learning how to read your own body language instead of listening to all the crazy shit in your brain. And that's what emotional sobriety is.
I love that explanation. And that's so true. Like, we don't realize, I just realize it more and more the more I work with people, the more I focus on myself, is most of what we experience is some sense of feeling unsafe. And
Mhm.
that if we don't know what else to do, if we can just come back to the present moment and make ourselves feel safe, then that's going to automatically help to open up our mind. Then maybe we can think of the next step for us. But if you don't know what else to do, just come back to the present moment and create safety within your body.
And the problem with that is that it's so unfamiliar to feel that way. You know, I never felt safe relaxing because if I relaxed, that meant I wasn't doing something. I forgot something. The other shoe's about to drop. And this is where trauma healing is so important to understand that it may not be it's not it's so weird that it's not easy to feel good. Like, how is that true? But we can't give ourselves permission, and we get so addicted to the stress chemicals in our body that the absence of them doesn't feel safe. I was in fight or flight for years, and I had no idea how to exist in a state of calm. And so that's also part of the learning process. Like, our conversation today may inspire somebody. And maybe if you're listening, take a deep breath and just feel. But understanding that that feeling is what you want more of. Again, your brain will help you get whatever you think you want. And if you want peace, your brain will help you solve for that. If you want sobriety, then your brain's going to help you solve that. And there's a lot of problems with that because it's the absence of something. That's why your body is feeling anxious when you think, I'm never going to drink again. Your body is like sending up error codes of like, that doesn't feel good in my body. And then we never learned how to trust ourselves, how that, okay, that's not a good thought. What would be a different thought? People don't know how to feel safe anymore. Like it's not normal. Um, it's not common.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of being in a group of women working towards the same thing, where you have somebody like you holding that safe space for them. I started doing that in my group too, where we do nervous system regulation calls because there is that apprehension about it's very vulnerable, but to have be in the presence of other women who are being just as vulnerable and having somebody hold space for that it's a beautiful experience.
Yeah. We co-regulate.
Mhm.
And so having a community that normalizes chill, that normalizes, slowing down. I know I just surrounded myself always with people who were running faster than I was. First person to crazy town wins, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So you work with really successful, high achieving women. And I noticed this with parents that I work with who are successful and high achieving is the things that made them successful in life work against them when they're trying to help their son or daughter. And so they need a completely different approach. And I'm wondering if you find that with the women that you work with as well.
Very much so. Like me, most of my clients are so frustrated because they are so disciplined. They have so much willpower and control in other areas of their life, but not this one. And it goes against, and that's why they get kind of like, when your wheels and the tire are stuck in a rut and you just keep spinning and spinning, you're just getting yourself deeper and deeper because the harder you try to change the behavior, because that's what you see as the problem, it's not the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. If you weren't over drinking, you would be doing something else because your body needs a break. And so that is what people have to understand, is that the mindset of perfectionism, checking the boxes, achieving the goals, it's like you can never get there with alcohol because how long do you have to be perfect? What does perfect mean before you're allowed to feel safe or you're allowed to feel like that's behind you? Like, is one glass okay? Is no glasses? Is it Wednesday night's not okay, but Friday night it is? Like, our brains are always changing what's okay and what's not okay. We also define that around who we're around. So somebody else's drinking habits, you're going to have feelings about your own there. And so trying to change your behavior according to some external metric and thinking, I can't feel better until I've proven that I've changed, that's not a thing. Actually, you're not going to change it until you learn how to feel better first. Like that's the flip. They think, I'll feel better when I can control my drinking. Nope. I will control my drinking when I feel better. And so the goal has to shift from doing better, to being okay right where you're at. And my clients were used to these mindsets that are very performance based. And those are great at work and for corporations and, sports and things like that. But understanding there are different types of mindsets. We use the iterative mindset, which is kind of like the grandchild of the growth mindset, where you're just always tinkering with your strategies and you're always going to learn either from what went well or what didn't go well. And you're okay. And you trust yourself to pay attention and to learn and to keep moving forward. And that perfectionistic mindset that says, well, if I didn't get a 10 out of 10, then I guess I can't. I'm going to give up and I don't want to do this anymore. And I'll think about it next year. That's the mindset that's perpetuating the cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good point that, perfectionism definitely comes in there. And, when I was trying to figure out how to help Helena, it was like, well, I've never met a problem in my life I can't figure out. I can outwork anything. So I thought. But
Yeah.
it turned out to be a real gift to me to have to learn another way and to stop and tune into myself and like what actually works with humans and what motivates change and how you actually connect with others and yourself. So I think another way to even look at this rather than this horrible experience of struggling with drinking or having a child that struggles with substance use is this opportunity to really learn and grow and become the person that you always knew that you could be. It just opens the door for that.
Yeah. Something you said where looking at Helena's substance use as a problem. Like we've heard the thing, we don't know how to apply it, but the mindset that sees the problem can't solve it. The mindset's creating it. Like just imagine when I look at myself or when I look at my own children or my clients, my goal is always to stay very neutral. It's not a problem, it's data. It's information. How can we be curious and compassionate? What is the alcohol or the substance doing for them? People, everybody's motivated. Nobody is not motivated. Everybody's motivated to get their needs met. And so and nobody wants to tank their life. Everybody's doing the very best they can. And so seeing a person or even their behavior as a problem is the problem that makes things so much worse because it inflames relationships with self and others with guilt and fear and shame and anxiety. And that's what causes, things to get so much worse.
Hmm. Yeah, so that brings me to my last question for you. Is your motto get happy, not sober? Let's end on that note with sharing what that means to you.
Well, sober or any amount of, less drinking is a side effect. And happiness to me is mental health. It is understanding that happiness isn't something that happens to you, it's something that you choose. Also, a great deal of happiness comes from overcoming struggles. You don't get happy because everything is perfect today and it's never going to change and you're never going to have to do anything different. Like happiness is knowing you got this, like that hold my beer, unfuck with the bull. There is no problem. This problem isn't happening to me. I'm about to happen to the situation. That creates ongoing happiness. And so when you are learning the skills of emotional sobriety, that leads to happiness. And that solves the problem. On an energetic level, what we're doing is we're raising ourselves to a level where that problem doesn't exist anymore. Happy people don't drink themselves into a stupor. And so if you solve for whatever it is that you're trying to escape or that you don't have the tools to deal with or the things that need to change that you're scared to change and so you're using alcohol as a placeholder. If you get the support and help you need to get happy, you don't have to worry about your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to end. And I love what you said about that overcoming obstacles makes you feel good. And that creates happiness. And if our lives were easy all the time, we would just get bored.
Yeah. We do get bored, and in this common day and age, that's what we're doing. We're creating problems because we don't know how to sit still and enjoy a nice, relaxing thing. But there are no problems. There's challenges, there's opportunities. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And so, bad habits, yours or somebody else's, The challenge is, how do I show up for this as the best version of myself with compassion, kindness, and curiosity?
Yes. So if somebody wants to know more about you or your program, how do they do that?
Well, I have a website, emotionalsobrietycoaching.com. I have a podcast. It's not about the alcohol. And I'm on social media at The Hangover Whisperer.
Well, that'll be easy to remember. All right. I'll put that in the show notes too. So thank you so much for your time today, Colleen.
Thank you, Heather.